Hello and welcome to episode 21 of the Rogue Health Economist. I am super excited here today because we have our first political candidate on the show, and it is one of the most exciting campaigns that I've seen. I had an opportunity to just check out the website and the positioning. And so a warm welcome to the Rogue Health Economist, Paulette Jordan. Welcome, Paulette.
Thanks, James, and thanks everyone, your entire following, for having me. I really appreciate not only the opportunity to be here, but just to learn and to listen from those like you who are part of the integrative health community.
Amazing. So let's just start with the story. I know that everyone is probably really excited to understand, there's only few people feel the call to run, right? And to run and to serve. Where did that feeling come from, and what forced you to follow it?
Honestly, it's just a matter of the way I was raised. A lot of folks who don't know me should know that I was raised by an entire community of elders, and on the Coeur d'Alene Reservation and my father's reservation. Both my mother and father are tribal, so I grew up on tribal lands all throughout the Pacific Northwest. And you're often raised by a community of people who are guided by an ancient wisdom and knowledge. And I was very fortunate to be able to be connected to all of these great folks, all great leaders. And because of that lineage that I descended from, I'm really thankful that I've been able to have such powerful influence. So these elders of mine that I grew up with, these are folks who were doctors and lawyers and judges, and they've just done a lot of good work being ambassadors of the environment and ambassadors of humanity. And as I was growing up, a lot of them would press upon me, not only their vision, but their challenges and their achievements. And so I was able to take from all of that, and by design, I should say, and their encouragement, I ended up in leadership positions from a time at a young age. In fact, I was 6 years old when my grandmother handed me a microphone and said, you're a young chief, you should address the people and thank them for being here. And that was a remarkable feeling that I still remember to this day, because I was shaking my little shoes. And I remember reaching for the mic, and she said, just to speak from your heart. And that was my first experience speaking to an entire gym full of people in that auditorium, thanking them, speaking from my heart. And it just grows from there. And so every opportunity you get, your elders say that when you're asked to lead or do something, you do it because it's an honor or considered a privilege. And so one thing led to another, and now here I am running for U.S. Senate. I ran a race in 2018 after serving 2 terms in the state house in Idaho as a representative. And then even prior to that, I served on my tribal council. But like I said, it leads from one step to the other. And so now here we are running for United States Senate for the state of Idaho.
Amazing. So what does it look like from here? Like, if you were to win, what has to happen between now and when for you to become that state senator?
Well, we're still in the primary, so we have to get out of the primary, which is happening on June 2nd. People have until 8 p.m. that day to vote or get their vote in. And it's going to be, I think, a pretty royal or interesting election, because there's an unprecedented amount of people who have registered to vote and received their ballots. And so they just need to turn those ballots in, and hopefully we'll be the victor of that race. But that's June 2nd. And of course, once we get out of the primary and we're able to take on Jim Risch, I think it'll be a vastly different conversation, because then we'll be able to go head to head, and it'll be night and day contrast from where we stand on healthcare to the environment, and where our future lies will be in the hands of those who decide to vote that election in November.
Beautiful. So it's probably no coincidence that if you're drawing on Indigenous wisdom, the 2 areas that you've chosen to focus your campaign are health and agriculture. So what is it that you learned from your Indigenous wisdom that you want to turn into policy in those 2 areas?
Well, I'll tell you, a lot of my grandparents, grandfathers and grandmothers were all chiefs. And, on each side, they have taught me that it's always about putting the people first. And that's why I promote a people first policymaking strategy. So this entire campaign is very grassroots driven. Everything we do is comprised of people who are experts in each field, from healthcare to education, even the military, and we're putting them all at the table. So everyone has a seat and everyone has a voice. And this is all about my version of equality. And that is the way, things should be run. So I'm operating my campaign the way a government should operate, which is everyone having a seat at the table. And we're working together as individuals who are key experts in each individual field, serving to build a functional policy that can be applicable to everyone on an equal basis, but in the best practice possible. That's why I'm so very much grateful for you and Dr. Mimi Garneri and Wayne Miller, who is our chief of staff, and all the people who we have been able to work with, who are experts globally in healthcare. Even Dr. Alex Kahana has been great working in terms of finance and the future of health and what that looks like in blockchain technology. So we had just a lot of people who are involved in this campaign, and I think that's really what makes it most effective, because once you're elected into office, the whole point of getting elected is to promote policy that shows that you not only are listening and truly care about the people, but that can actually improve people's lives. So this, the campaign really is, I think, essentially serving to drive a model that other people can use, and I think that's what's groundbreaking. But the other issue is that we have to get other people to believe in government again, and all that comes by just relating to people, young and old. And I think that's part of what my heritage is about, because we are raised to honor our children, and we're raised to respect our elders. And these are, to me, concepts that I don't often see in other cultures. And I honestly want to see us be able to apply this way of life to the rest of the country. I think there are points of Indigenous cultures that are applied throughout the United States history and culture that people take in, but not all of it. So I'm hoping through my own level of leadership that was basically bred through me, that I'm going to be able to share with the rest of those in Idaho and the rest of the country, because I find it to be vastly important and a missing piece when it comes down to how we're able to rebuild humanity back together again, and how we're going to build nature back into that cycle as well. So my culture definitely has a lot to offer. And I know that through my own leadership style, which is very unique and not yet seen in Congress, I'm hopeful that we'll get elected and then be able to show people what that looks like. And again, because this really applies very well in healthcare, we've had multiple conversations about what holistic or integrative healthcare should look like. And this is applied through every single thought process that I've been able to talk about so far.
Yeah, I'd love to dive into that, because really I think that's what is most exciting about this, to our community. Certainly the functional integrative medicine world, lifestyle medicine, there's lots of different names for it. I know that Idaho has been very progressive with naturopathic medicine. And I guess I wonder why you feel such a draw to this method of medicine, because ultimately I think a lot of people in our community feel like it's so obvious, but yet we've just been left on the sidelines, and ultimately, especially to a certain degree, by the Democratic Party, who has had traditionally a lot of connection to the pharmaceutical industry. It's been both sides, but ultimately it's one of the reasons why I think that people are frustrated that this common sense ideas of creating health at a grand scale, which is what lives in the hearts of our community, that voice is never heard, and that message is never propelled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's very important for people to understand that, traditionally, the Indigenous way of life here has been about community. Everything is done with this element or the aspect of community, and by community, on behalf of the community. And this is really, truly the way that I think we move forward. Now we're finding that, people who are like from the Cleveland Clinic, affirming that group visits are in fact better than one-on-one visits in a little room. People are seeing that when people work collectively together, much more is done. And this comes to apply to healing, this comes to education, this comes forth in business. When everyone works together, things are just that much better. So I just think it's very simple, but it seems to be a new process for folks who are just about pulling themselves up by the bootstraps. I think they get it all wrong when they think about the old manifest destiny way of life. And I think that's been wrong from the get-go, because we should not be about ourselves, and we should not be about greed and corruption. And this is where it all stems from, is just thinking for ourselves versus thinking for each other and thinking for our community. But I think that really changes the landscape. Even the language, how we communicate with one another, changes our thinking, our thought process, and how we interact. And for my people, I honestly believe the phrase "walk your talk" stems from that Indigenous perspective, because we're people that's are based on verb language, where we are descriptive of how things are related to one another, and we are about action. Versus the English language, which is of nouns, and it's based on how things are different from one another. So we are connectively trying to always show that we are related as a people. And I just honestly don't see that in this country much as I would love to see it. In the tribal community, however, we're always talking about how we're always related. We're not only cousins, we're brothers and sisters, aunties and uncles, and we often talk to each other as relatives, and we even relate ourselves to nature in a very similar fashion, where we are related to our land, we're related to wildlife, we're related to water. We call everything grandmother, grandfather. So there's there's connectivity, this relativity that really empowers every single being and puts them back into this framework of empowerment where everything is equal. And I really do appreciate that thought process, but I don't see that in medicine. And I think this is why, you and others who are talking about integrative and functional medicine as methods of what healthcare should look like really applies to us, as this is our Indigenous worldview. And so I just see that there is a real spiritual element in all of this, and this is how we grow and how we rebuild or re-engineer healthcare for the country.
100%. One of the things that you say on your website, which I totally align with. So in 2015, actually, I put on the first year that I sort of broke out with this functional forum, I put on a summit called the Evolution of Medicine. That's actually the name of my business, is the Evolution of Medicine, because I was like, medicine's just adapting to its new environment of chronic disease. And through that first year, I started to realize, like, I'm not sure if this is one is going to evolve into another. So the second year, I called it Evolution of Medicine Summit 2, Healthcare from Scratch, because I realized that, that hospitals, as an example, with their fluorescent lights and no natural light and, huge buildings and all those kind of things, are not just adaptable into health creation, which needs nature and, all these completely different elements. And so one of the things you said on your it's sort of in your positioning is that you feel we need to kind of start again when it comes to healthcare. And I would just love for you to go a little bit deeper into that, because it certainly speaks to something that I've come to feel. And I think actually what's happening in the functional integrative space right now is we are building the new system. And perhaps the COVID has actually created this sort of lack of inertia that has existed for maybe 150 years, depending on how you look at it, where there's been an inertia to move to something different. And ultimately this moment of just fragility of our population has helped us realize that there is an urgency to do something different. And I'd love for you just to comment on your feelings about starting from scratch versus sort of tinkering around the edges.
Well, it's no secret that our country has really overspent when it comes to chronic care, and since the passage of Obamacare to over 10 years ago, or nearly 10 years ago, I would say that it's been just a tremendous difference in how much we've spent to how many people have been cured by all of these chronic illnesses, and that number is very low. So the transformation needle has very rarely moved, and that's unfortunate, because it's clearly time to do something different. And the constant message throughout my campaign has been to think differently. And while the ACA was fundamentally built on expanding access and having the government pay for it, while it was helpful, it demonstrated yet again that the reform of healthcare in America cannot be done by piecemeal. It must be re-engineered from the ground up. This has always been my message in the campaign, because this is what I truly believe is people first policy. And it is my highest priority for all legislation that I will sponsor and support. So I often bring this up because healthcare is at the top of everyone's minds, especially in this pandemic. People are, concerned about, where they're going to get, their medications, or where they're going to receive healthcare. A lot of people can afford it. In fact, there's still suffering, and people are getting sick and dying in our country. And, it's really even more concerning in highly suppressed areas economically, like my community, and people who are now being impacted by the virus. They don't know where to go, and so it's getting to be more and more challenging, especially for all of rural America and rural Idaho, where healthcare providers are few and far between. But now, we're seeing even greater challenges with how we finance our system, where we have a finance system that doesn't work well, and it's the wrong focus for a meaningful conversation. So I think one of the most important things we can do is incorporate the best practices of integrative and functional medicine into primary care services and have all of them reimbursed for insurance coverage so that preventative and restorative services can finally reach the entire population. And this should be available no matter where or how you get your insurance coverage. But this, to me, goes by means of what I've seen in my community, which is people struggling in rural spaces like North Idaho, where we struggle to have nutritional strategies, services that or even services that effectively address the various social determinants of health, and services that effectively address adverse childhood events, body and movement therapies, stress reduction therapies, acupuncture, and health coaching into primary care. All of these strategies or applicants of health would really help our people, and yet we're still fighting the opioid industry. We're still fighting big pharma, and just how these medical providers are promoting certain drugs to address some of these ills instead of looking to address them with long-term strategies that would be far more effective. I'd rather see my elders going through physical therapy, which we're now applying with the Coeur d'Alene tribe, but you're not seeing that everywhere else. So I want to see people be able to apply acupuncture and be able to go through other stress reduction therapies like we have in our community, but I don't see that everywhere. And I think this should be available and accessible to everyone. So this is the way I see the future. And I would love to see us be able to cut back on how much we spend on chronic care in this country. But all that can be done by just simply re-strategizing in the way we look at healthcare. And this is why I see the conversation being far more functional when we're speaking of the way we shape medicine and the methods of how we apply them.
That 5-minute answer, I'm going to clip it out and I'm going to send it to everyone because that was just so on point, and I really appreciate you sharing it so clearly. And you obviously do have the right people behind you, because there are issues of access to all of those kinds of therapies, and the group dynamic can really facilitate it to be affordable and accessible for all, and has so many side benefits of really engaging this sort of peer-to-peer accountability. One more question on healthcare, and then I want to talk about agriculture too, because it's obviously so tied in to our health outcomes. Obviously in the natural health world, I think there's a lot of people that believe, like you said, that we need to re-engineer healthcare from the ground up for everyone with this kind of structure. There's also a lot of people who have felt compelled towards pharmaceutical-driven chronic disease and have only been able to resist that because of certain health freedoms that are in the Constitution, and that that in different states are being sort of chipped away at as we speak. And I would love to just get your thoughts on, in the progress towards this utopian vision that you've shared, where do you stand on people's right to choose their own healthcare and to choose a type of healthcare that is not a pharmaceutical first approach, if they and their family realize that it's not as effective as it's maybe made out to be?
I think in all honesty, a lot of people may not realize that they've been lied to. And it's unfortunate because it's all about corporate profits. And in the end, we have to be reliant on scientific data and research. And there's a very vast difference in what is the bottom line for corporations versus what's the bottom line for our government, and how much we as taxpayers are investing into healthcare. And as we all know, scientific research today is subject to a lot of different influences, including a course of corruption by these commercial interests. This is why I consider a holistic approach to health and healthcare as inevitable. And in promoting this policy for the country, I consider myself and those who support it to be on the right side of both real science and in harmony with the spiritual basis of the culture in which I was raised.
Boom. That's it. That's all you have to say. Okay, so let's move into agriculture, because, literally this year, if you look at leaders like Mark Hyman, wrote a book called Food Fix. that was about, really that we can't fix healthcare without going deeper into the food system. Just last week, I had Joel Salatin, who's a rogue farmer, one of the best known farmers in America, who's written a book about health and that connection there. So it's obviously coming into sort of like people really starting to understand that food plays a huge role in health, and that's another sort of big part of your platform. So again, what can we learn from the elders about agriculture and about the environment, and how does that reflect into your policy?
Well, my elders, and I'll tell you just to sort of reach back to the last question, because, I was thinking about the idea of choice, and everyone loves choice. First and foremost, I love choice. I was given choices since I was a kid on what I was going to do on a day-to-day basis, and I appreciate that. But I think people need to know the truth, and that should be laid out on the table. Just the same way that, our farmers who are, choosing between using chemicals to their fields or choosing to go the natural route. It's all going to come down to the health of our soil. And so conservation and so of course soil conservation districts are really going to play a really strong and very important role into the future, because our farmers really need not only nutritional health in their soil, but they're going to need to make sure that they're paying attention to climate and drought seasons, and of course the market, and even the political space that we're in. So there are a lot of challenges for farmers, but it does really connect to overall nutritional health, and it's going to get down to how we're going to sustain our immunity and build our immunity up with foods that are grown in a healthy soil. So they're going to need the right environment to grow these foods, and of course people, if they're not able to grow their own foods in their own backyard, or grow their own foods on their own land, they should consider it, because it's going to come down to not only growing your own foods, trusting that it's not going to be oversaturated with chemicals, but you're also going to be very reliant on the farmers. And right now it's not a good situation the way many of them are, the frustrating situation that many of them are in. So I will tell you that this is the future, nutritional health, and being able to build up your immunity to sustain this epidemic. And of course, even for the future, with what we see with air quality and water quality being threatened, and our soil quality being threatened, I just think a lot of people have a lot to think about. And I think this is why food sovereignty has become an issue that has risen to the top, because nutritional health care is certainly one of the major issues when it comes down to our own health security.
Yeah, absolutely. I just love to, one of the things I noticed on your website is that you feel like Idaho could be a center for Agrotech. And when I hear the word Agrotech, I think the opposite of what you just think. I think about Monsanto, and I think about owning seed patents and those kind of things. Where do you see what kind of Agrotech do you think that Idaho can attract and still maintain the sort of the integrity of what you just mentioned?
Agrotech really applies to the future of agriculture that can be helpful to farmers. And honestly, there's new ways, new methods for farmers that can save time and resources, but also clean energy is integrated into that. I really want to see us employ the national strategy that I'm working on with the DNC's Environmental Climate Crisis Council that I sit on. We have just an application that I really think would be great for everyone to attach to, because it's the future. And we have to include our agricultural community, which I'm also part of in North Idaho, to be invested into this arena, so that we can make sure that we are securing the future of farmers. We're seeing, from many continents, that farmers are not only just challenged from just how they're able to share their crops or growing crops, but how they're mistreated economically. And so these trade agreements are hurting them. And the negotiations even locally, and how their crops are being developed or manufactured, and who's really making the money in all of these agreements, these arrangements. So it's hard for me to hear that our farmers are committing suicide, or that their land's being taken away from them, or just how it's affecting our entire state, not only in GDP but in food source. So this becomes a major issue for me. But we are looking into AgTech as the way to apply some support, and So it's variable in what we're discussing there. And I definitely try to expand a little bit more on my website at Paulette for Senate, so people can take a look as to what we're really looking to address. But from clean energy and their tractors to the way they're able to apply solar or wind power to generate electricity for their methods of or their crop methods. These are the ways that we're looking to apply tech to the future of farming.
Beautiful. Okay. I guess I just want to, like, the little question I want to ask you is it seems to me that, that the Democratic Party has certainly featured younger female leaders who have become kind of rock stars of the party very quickly. But to my knowledge, and I might just have not witnessed it, like I don't see any Native American representation there. And I was just wondering what you feel as far as the potential of Native American representation in Washington, and how you feel that kind of energy will be received.
I think it'll be interesting because when you've never been there and you're the first, you definitely open up a lot of people's eyes. And I think the perspective that I have, and I think the energy and the knowledge that I will bring will be very different. And so people won't be used to this. But I think they'll be very receptive. A lot of people that I work with nationally already, they're very receptive to my voice. We already have a lot of good partnerships on both sides of the aisle, which I'm very proud of, because that takes a lot of good know-how and strategy, and just being able to have those relationships, I think, is what really empowers us to be a strong voice for Idaho. But I do understand the relevance or the meaning of being the first in making history, but I think even greater is the opportunity to work with people from all walks of life, and to just understand that you come with a great sense of responsibility, because I know there are a lot of young people and people in Indian country, as we say, who would love to see themselves, in these halls of Congress, and what that means to our young children. Being the first, and of course being Indigenous, and of course not having had representation in this government at a national level is shocking, and yet it's been just a long time coming. So I hope that we will be able to see more faces who are Indigenous in these halls to represent the planet, represent humanity, and the communities that have been very humbled, but yet very proud in their culture, very proud to think very holistically. We're very pragmatic and sensible. So I think that just comes by means to offer a culture that has always been here, that this country stands on. And, it's a country that stands on independence and freedoms. And these are the same independence and freedoms that my grandparents fought for. So I'm just really thankful to be able to offer not only this level of wisdom that my elders invested into me, but to be able to share that with the country. I think that's what's important.
Beautiful. Well, look, one thing I'm definitely going to do after this interview is I'm going to introduce you to my friends at Functional Medicine Idaho, who I feel are literally sort of executing the practice model that we have been advocating for really for 6 years, where all of their care is available on insurance, where they take large advantage of community-based offerings and group visits, where they're bringing together a practitioner team that is capable of reversing chronic disease. And they have very, ambitious goals in Boise and outside of Boise and in the Pacific Northwest. And I would love to show you that, because I'm always looking for great examples. And when I heard that you were running, the first thing I thought of was that clinic, because obviously it's a lot easier for other practitioners once they see it to think, okay, yeah, that's obvious. And then, once a politician sees it, to go, okay, I can really resonate with this part of things. So I look forward to doing that. There was one piece of Indigenous wisdom in my book, The Community Cure, that came out in January. And I wanted to share it with you. And I actually met with a guy called Iron Eagle of the Yankton Sioux tribe of South Dakota. And he said, we were talking about the building of community, and he said, we're at a time in history, and he said, it's time to re-energize the circle. And I just felt that was such a beautiful way of describing you know, what's necessary in healthcare with sort of getting groups of people together. The circle, you know, I could think of is sort of like the water cycle and all those things that are involved in the environment. And it does seem that what you're sharing in your platform is the re-energizing of the circle. And to be honest, for me, like I grew up in America. I mean, I was born here. I grew up in England. I moved back here when I was 25. Neither of the political parties have really done it for me, honestly, in my time here. I haven't felt at home. And what I've heard you say here today and share with what your vision is and what you'd like to do really resonates at a much deeper level than I've heard from. There's been bits and pieces here and there from certain people who I've thought, okay, yeah, they're really onto something. But I just feel like the platform that you have created, whether or not you win, I feel will send a signal out to many other people around the country that see that there is a structure and a narrative that can be built that is enticing to young and old, to you know, to all of the races, and is an inclusive vision that's grounded in the freedoms that are a part of what America stands for. So I wish you the greatest luck. I will definitely be sending this out to our community in the integrative and functional medicine community. I hope that if people are watching this at home and they're in Idaho, that they are able to get out before June the 2nd and make an impact at the polls. And if you were to win that and you were to be sort of the Democratic representative, when would the final election be? Would it be November 4th?
November 3rd.
November 3rd.
It feels right around the corner to me, but I know it's a bit of a ways off. But yeah, we're excited. We're going to be championing all the way through.
Amazing. So where can people go if they want to find out more about your stuff, if they want to donate, if they want to support your vision? Where's the best place to support you?
Yes, thank you for asking. People can go to pauletteforsenate.com, and there they can sign up to receive updates, text, emails from us. So there's multiple ways to participate, whether they want to volunteer or contribute. You know, we have a movement that's you know, grassroots, connected to the community. It's not funded by PACs or corporations, so it's I think it's just the best way to go, and I think that's the ultimate way to be honest and transparent. And this is another way of taking money out of politics. And ultimately, once we do get there, get to Congress, that's the aim, to take money out of politics. We need to get more people like us elected so that we can truly champion the voices of the people.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And I can tell you that it's already happening and that there are more people who are stepping up even as we speak. I had a friend of mine in Tampa, Florida, who just announced yesterday that he's running for state Senate because he realizes that, you know, the work that has to be done at that level is there. So the wave has started. Thank you for your leadership and for sharing the wisdom of your elders and taking it to where it needs to go to make the kind of change that we need to see. And we will be following up, and I will take some of the questions that have come in, and I promise to do a follow-up with you, hopefully in person in Idaho sometime between June 2nd and November 2nd.
I hope so. I hope to have lunch.
Well, this has been the Rogue Health Economist podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. We've been with Paulette Jordan. She is running for U.S. Senate in the state of Idaho. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking with Dr. David Katz, who has been one of the most sensible voices out there talking about total harm minimization with regard to COVID, and really excited to connect with him tomorrow. But this has been an amazing episode. Thanks so much for being part of it. And we'll see you guys same time, same place tomorrow. And we'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you.